The Five Rings Podcast, Road to Tokyo on the Sports Podcasting Network. Your weekly fix leading up to the 2020 Olympic Games with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramée. Follow us and listen to us live on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network for more content.
Good day, good night, and welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Kevin Laramée, joined by Duane Rollins as always. Today we'll talk about the Lou Marsh Trophy, but we'll talk about something that we've been talking about a lot in the existence of this show. Two names, or two nouns, that have been synonym of each other, I guess, over the last few years. Three of them, actually. Russia, doping, and ban.
Yeah, indeed. A 4-year ban on Russia participating under the Russian flag with Russian anthems and all that sort of stuff handed down by WADA. Appeals to come, but seems like it's going to be more of the same for the next 4 years that we saw over the athletics championships and the last couple of Olympics. So whether this changes anything, this is the question. It's an ongoing conversation that we've had. This one seems a little more something, because it's all sports this time after the Euro Championship, even the World Cup, that's a bit different. So I don't know, maybe they'll get their attention. But if you look at the reaction in Russia, it's predictable. It's like the West is out to get us, and they're lying. So what are you going to do, basically? Because really this ban has to shame them before it can do anything to change anything, really.
If you want to know more about Russia and the ban situation, Duane and I did a special show on Monday on our Patreon feed, which for $5 a month, you'll get at least one show a week, 5 Rings Extra. It usually is Duane and I diving deep into the Montreal 1976 Olympics for the next weeks to come. But when there's breaking news audio, we're going to bring you the breaking news audio. And Russia was big enough news in our mind to talk about it. And we mentioned that what is there to do? What, in theory, could be done to a country that is openly circumventing the rules? And let's call a spade a spade. It's not necessarily just doping. There's data falsification, and there's just cheating on multiple levels. Federation-sponsored, state-sponsored, that's where it becomes the question. And we trying to answer that question. What can we do, Duane? What can we do outside of banning outright? This is like the one step below of banning outright. There's still a couple competitions they'll be taking part of. And if you prove your cleanliness, you can participate. But outside of this level of ban, what else can be done?
Yeah, not much. Really, max operating the testing and getting ahead of the dopers. The problem is that WADA as an organization does not have the resources of these countries. If you're determined to get through and get past and to manipulate the rules, you're going to be able to do it unless the world came together and decided that they were all going to contribute to a testing program that was universal and thorough and truly random. That maybe you would not bash it out, but you can't. If you have just one outlier, one bad pat, one bad piece of the recipe, the rest is going to be rotten, and that's the problem here. And so all you really have, the only power they have, is to take the glamour away, to take the glory away, to take the shine away, and they're trying to do that, but by allowing them to continue, Russian athletes, that is, to continue to participate if they prove that they're quote unquote clean. And again, if they're really determined to get around these rules, they probably still can get away with it. They're still going to hold them up as examples of something, right? Like the hockey team is still seen as winning the gold medal. It's the example I keep coming up with, because ice hockey is a sport that matters to that country, and it would have mattered to them, regardless of the NHL players there being there or not, to have won. Well, the fact there were some NHL players on that team, it tells you all you need to know. It would have mattered to them to have won the Pyeongchang gold medal, and they got that, and they're going to claim that as their own, regardless of what anthem, if any, played at the end of the competition. So it's kind of a depressing conversation. But
wait, I'm going to make it even more depressing. How about they don't even care about the repercussions and the ban because they had their day in the sun. The last decade was when they needed the results. The celebration in front of their fans already took place. They already hosted the Olympics and the World Cup. They already used doping products, and I can say this openly because it's been proven. They've used doping products in Sochi, and we all have seen the pictures from the Russia World Cup of the arms of the Russian players that we've shown on this show multiple times. They had the day in the sun. They celebrated. They had their victories. They had their podiums. They had their medals, and they had their great game at the World Cup. They don't care about any repercussion. At least that's what the actions say. Like, look, we did it. We had our time in the sun. We celebrated. Doesn't matter if the hangover lasts a couple years after that. We had what we needed at that moment, and we'll pay for it. No problem. They did the crime. They'll do the time, but no one will ever take away the celebrations. And I guess that's where it hurts. Is you realize that you're useless in front of. And that's maybe even the IOC and WADA realizes that they're almost useless confronted to a problem to this scale.
The only thing I could, they really, the moment in the sun stuff has always been the problem that you have here. I mean, that's Becky Scott, Olympic champion Becky Scott. She didn't even get to see the flag on the podium. Right. She eventually got her gold medal like 3 years later after athlete after athlete after athlete was stripped of theirs because of the cheating that occurred. So she may be an Olympic champion, but the reason she's such an advocate still for clean sport right now is because she had that moment taken from her, even though she has the trinket in her drawer and she knows in her heart of hearts that she is the Olympic champion. She didn't get to raise her arms. She didn't get to, be pulled to the CBC studio and cry about how her grandma used to take her to practice. She didn't get to stand and look at a flag or to listen to an anthem. The medal is the least of it, right? And these athletes still have those moments. They still have that record. I'm sure, to spin this in a negative way for a Canadian perspective, Ben Johnson still crossed the line ahead of Carl Lewis. Now, regardless of what you think about the rest of that field, and we all have our opinion on it, but he was determined to have been dirty, and he still had his moment with his hand in the air. You're right. It's depressing because the only way that I can see having any chance to get ahead of these athletes is to, again, it involves a lot of money and a lot of resources that they just don't have. Like they'd have to test every athlete. Every athlete would have to be part of a random test for the.
Well, never mind the random. It's just everyone's tested all the time.
Yeah.
It can't be random at this point. That's the thing. And it would be easy to say, okay, test every single Russia athlete to get back to Russia. Like, okay, every single athlete from Russia, which is going to be the case now, right? If you're not a Russian athlete right now, you have to prove your cleanliness. But it's almost to a point where, okay, now every Russian athlete, if you're an Olympic athlete, you're an international level sport athlete, you're getting tested all the time, and everyone. And you imagine the resources? This is going to kill all sport. What is there to do? Should we just give up and you'd be like, okay, open season, inject whatever you want in your veins. You can pop the pills you want. You can sniff the performance enhancing you want. You can smoke the cannabis you want for recovery. It's open season, no doping, anti-doping. What is the solution? Because if we look in society as a general, which sometimes helps us put this problem into perspective, the war on drugs has been a failure. And this war on drugs has been a failure too.
Yeah, well, you're talking about prohibition is always never works, right? Because they'll find other ways. Weed is legal in Canada now, has been for 2 years. I think people were doing weed before that 2 year period, right?
I can't remember.
Well, yeah, I'm not a weed guy, so I wasn't, but I know it's not that it wasn't there, right? Because prohibition didn't work. Has anyone had a drink before 19, 21, 18, whatever the ages where you are? Of course they have. It's not anything that ever works. But, the problem with performance enhancing and just opening it wide open, it's that the problem is the kids, really. It ultimately comes down to that. Yes, I can actually philosophically make an argument that they should just allow athletes to choose what they want to do with their bodies. It's their body. And if that includes putting a steroid into them so that they have, their 30s are strong and their 20s are strong and they can compete into their...
And do they have 41?
Yeah, they can compete into their early 40s, then, and the sacrifice for that they know going in is that their 60s are going to be tough on them, which is essentially the choice that they're making. They're choosing to, to live young and to live young and fast, right? And to die young in many cases, because these drugs, particularly back in the day, back in the 80s, 90s, were really horrible on their bodies. I would remind you that the world 100-meter record holder for women died in her 30s of liver failure. So, it had consequences, whatever you had to do to get that time. So if that's the choice philosophically as an adult, as a grown adult, I don't have a problem with that. But the problem here I do have is that if you make that the issue, then everyone's going to start earlier and earlier and earlier, and you're going to have people that really are making this choice to harm themselves in ways that aren't reversible when they were nowhere close to this dream. I mean, I think back to myself when I was 15, say, had I been just a little bit better in my track or my wrestling or hockey, maybe someone says, here's a pill and this might allow you to make the rep team in hockey, like the AAA team in hockey. You know what? As a 15-year-old, I might take that pill, even if it meant I was going to take 5 years off my life. I might, because I don't have the wherewithal to make that choice at that point. And that's kind of what you're asking when you open drugs up the way that a fully open system would. It's not just about the 25-year-old deciding to take a tenth of a second off their 100-meter time. It's about the 14-year-old trying to take 0.5 of a second off their time just to make the high school team. And that's the problem.
Yeah. And if you look even now, you ask me, okay, Kevin, if I give you a pill, first of all, they'll give you back your 15 years of your life and you're 20 again. Yes, I'm taking that pill. And also, if you can have the type of performance that you would have under doping circumstances, if I was 15, 20 to become a pro athlete, maybe I do take it. And I guess that's the problem. When did we start to glorify the results to this point? Is it's all about money? I know this becomes a deep conversation, but it's almost the only way to fix this situation is to understand the primal reaction to winning, to understand why it's so important, what comes with it, the responsibilities that comes with it, but also the benefits. And it's literally is the carrot too big? And are people not necessarily aware of all the sacrifices necessary to get that result and the performances? I don't know, because it's not just in sports. When you think about it, it's a problem that exists everywhere else, just in different form. In this line of work, if you're an athlete, the way you get ahead in front of everybody else without getting caught is cheating. When you, example, work in Wall Street, and you have a little tip here and there, you have an insider information, and you act on it, which is not okay. It's insider trading, and you can get fined by the FCC or whatever it's called. So you still do it, you get an edge, and in the beginning wow, look at all the knowledge he has. Before you get caught, you're touted as successful. It's the same example, and it's hard because we glorify the success so much before realizing if that success is legitimate. I don't know where I'm going with this sentence here. I just know that it's not just a sports problem. It's just one symptom of that problem in society in general.
Well, the second place is first loser syndrome is what you're kind of talking about. It's how somebody will call an Olympian that finishes 15th a loser, or that they're pathetic or they're sad. You hear people say stuff like that, as ridiculous as it is. Like let's stick with Canada again. Back before on the podium and that, you would have Canadian Olympians that would finish 38th, and everyone would be like, "We're so bad. Our athletes are bad." They'd use terms like that: bad, awful, terrible. Finish 38th in the friggin' world. Like, come on, that's not bad or terrible. That's just not even close to that. These are elite people that are maybe the 0.98 instead of the 100, right? Like that's the kind of how we view the failure as much as how we view the success. And I don't know, you're getting into societal stuff at this point, as you say, but I guess maybe the answer in that particular case is just to get back to the idea and to really drill into the heads of young athletes in particular that you're competing against yourself. That sport is about pushing your own boundaries up as far as you could. And I think that if you're cheating, you're not really pushing yourself. You're cheating. It's like a test. I'm not smarter if I find the answer key and memorize it. I'm not. I'm going to get an A+, but I'm not smarter. You're not faster if you take something that artificially makes you faster. But at the same time, Kevin, I think the other thing that you have to really drill into people is that if you don't have that natural ability to be an Olympian, to be a gold medalist,
it's okay,
taking the drugs isn't going to necessarily fix that. It's just going to hurt you, and hurt you ethically, hurt you physically. The Icarus, we talk a lot about the second half of Icarus by the documentary. Watch the first half too. It's just as important, and the lesson is just as important. It's not a magic bullet. It's just dangerous, but it can be when used, in the wrong hands. It's not like how many Russian athletes didn't qualify for the Olympics that are having health problems now. That's as big a problem, and that's what really has to be driven home. And
we'll probably never know. It's not the type of problems that comes out of Russia in the news department. Usually these type of news and Russian athletes who die young and all these type of stuff don't come out in the mainstream media here in the Western world. They stay buried somewhere in the Eastern world. But I think it's important to understand the situation, to think about it sometimes, and to truly understand that it's the athletes sometimes, first of all, I don't even know. I'm sure there's Russian athletes that were doped without their consent, without knowing. That wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't shock me that some of them were all knowledgeable in that process and were willing also. And then there's shades of gray in between. They go from guilty and cheaters to being victims also. There's a big disparity. So it's important to look at this Russian problem in the world of international sports with the WADA doping bans, to keep an eye out, understand the nuances, and not necessarily categorize all Russian athletes in the same basket. And I think over the last few years here on the Five Rings podcast, we're able to explain the situation better than just international athlete good, Russian athlete bad, Russia's the villain and everybody else is James Bond. No, it is more nuanced, and like everything else in this world, it's all different colors of gray.
Yeah, no, I think that I've been pretty clear through at the time that I view the athletes who have cheated, particularly from these countries, as victims of circumstance, if not outright victims too. And it's the pressure and the inability to see the value in competing hard, and if that ceiling of competing to your very best is 50th in the world, then so be it. That said, I'm a sports fan. I don't want to take away the drive for excellence. That's the whole damn purpose of the Olympics. You can't eliminate that. Otherwise, we might as well just all go to art galleries and be subjective, right?
Well, that would be fun, but no, that's what we like about sport. Is sometimes it's as easy as who was the first one who crossed the line? He's the winner. And the fact that it's not the case because the winner took a product, that's what we're tired of.
Well, yeah, and I'm sick of not having my moment too, of watching sport and being amazed by it without having to go. Think about the 100 meter. The 100 meters is pure sport, really. Yeah, right. Let's just say someone, for the sake of argument, let's just say Andre DeGrasse runs a 9.48 next summer. My God, that would be incredible. But at the same time, in your whole mind, it'd be like, how do you take 0.2 of a second off? How do you take two? You wouldn't believe it.
No, we're
lost there too.
Yeah, we would be skeptical and cynical, and that's the fault and the result of all the dopers over the last, I don't know how many decades.
Well, world records have lost their value in track and field. When I did track, when I was 7,000 years ago, I knew the world record table by heart as a track and field athlete. I hesitate to call myself an athlete. As a track and field trier, I knew the world record by heart because they mattered. Those numbers mattered something. Those numbers are so dirty, are so tainted now that I know some of the bigger ones, but I don't know what the hell the world shot put record is anymore because they're tainted, right? And that's been taken away from us.
Yeah, it used to be something big. Well, I guess it still is, but
of course it is. But it's not something that is accepted as a big deal when it happens because you don't believe them.
It depends on the sport, right? Because if you talk about, example, high jumping or pole vaulting, a world record to that level, it's like it's hard to dope at pole vaulting. And again, you could probably take something to run a little faster before you plant that pole, or your pole could be just not respecting the rules. But again, there's a lot of things here. We hope we unpacked enough that you understand with this 20-minute conversation and the one we had on Monday. To put this into perspective, it's not just Russia, international villain and bad athletes. There's some of that. There's some of these athletes in probably every single country in the rest of the world. Canada, United States, Mexico, US, Great Britain, United Kingdom, France included. There's been dopers from almost every country getting caught. So let's just not kid ourselves and let's continue to fight that problem whichever way we are. And as sports fans, the only way we can do so is to talk about it and not just hide it. For years, we're like, oh, we have a doping fatigue. It's not like we can talk about it. We could have a doping podcast every single week, mention all the athletes that were caught this week. Okay, this guy caught. Yeah, who do you think is going to get caught next? And then having a doping pool, which we have athletes and dates and whoever gets picked and wins something. We could do that, but no. We decided to look at things in a bit more objective way, but also optimistic way, hopefully. And is it as clean now? Is it cleaner now, than it was when we started this show? I think so, but I have no idea if it actually is the case. It's just, yeah, it's our acceptance of this, I guess, changes too.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. It really is. Like, human growth hormone, for instance. I can see value in human growth hormone, particularly just in
the world.
Average people. Yeah, I think we should research it more. And I think that's as a final thought. That's really what we need to do. We need to really take a hard look at some of these things. And if they don't have a negative health impact long term, then maybe you let them be used, because at that point it's just someone choosing to do something that's beneficial to them. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. If someone offered me human growth hormone right now, personally, just to feel a little more energetic and
taller,
youthful, I'm probably going to take the damn thing, right? Yeah, if someone gives me a pill to go to 6'3" or to grow hair again, I'm going to take that too. Like, we're all susceptible to this. So, yeah.
Where's that pill to be thin? Yeah, I'm taking that too. Again, I guess we just explained the entire phenomenon.
Growth hormone, that's the pill to get thin, Kevin.
Yeah, it's growth hormone. It's not reducing. It's not human reducing hormones. Where are those? That's the one I need. Yeah. Let's continue. Let's move on to a more positive subject. Lou Marsh Trophy in Canada, Athlete of the Year, Bianca Andrescu, unanimously voted, and it's the first time, at least since I can recall, so at least for probably 2 decades, that it's been a unanimous vote.
Steve Nash was also unanimous when he was the MVP. The second year he won it.
Well, that's a bit more than 10 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, it was in the early 2000s, so it's close to 20 years now, as you say. But for those that don't know, we have international listeners in the show. The Lou Marsh is named after an athlete from the early part of the 20th century. I always get my centuries mixed up. You have to add one.
Yeah.
1900s. Yes. Anyway, so he was a famous athlete that competed in multiple sports and was generally viewed as like the ultimate athlete in this country. So they named the Toronto Star, which is the biggest newspaper by circulation in the country, decided to have an award that recognized the best athlete of Canadian stripes, regardless of any qualifications. It's not the best female, it's not the best team, it's not the best this, that, whatever. It's just the best athlete that year. Can be in a variety of sports. It's one of the awards I love talking about every year because it's so wide open, right? Like, what's it mean? Is a hockey player that wins a Stanley Cup in this country of Canada, where there's 60% of the NHL legitimately is Canadian. So
every year you could have a Canadian hockey player that wins the Stanley Cup, winning the Lou Marsh. It wouldn't be fair. Exactly.
Yeah. So it gets into a debate, and it's a little bit, it's not completely clear, and that kind of makes it fun to talk about. But there are occasions when there's such an obvious choice, because part of it is sort of doing something unexpected and that impacts beyond the world of sport, I think is a big criteria in the minds of the voters of this award. And, the other thing about this too, is that it used to be voted on by about 4 or 5 white men in a room. It's still a bunch of people in a room, but it is now not so,
not so white, not so
narrow.
Not so old.
Yeah. There are far more women in the room having votes. There are far more people of color, which has led to there being much more openness to athletes competing in sports that aren't traditional in this country. And when I say traditional, I'm basically referring to the same thing you refer to in the United States, which is, of course, your baseball, your hockey, your football, like throw the ball through the air football, and not even your basketball really in this country until very recently. So that's opened up, and that's a good thing. But in this particular case, a Canadian it had been more than 50 years since a Canadian had won a major trophy or major tournament in tennis, which I think is arguably the biggest individual sport in the world. I don't think you can really argue against that. It probably is the biggest individual sport in the world.
Globally, yeah. Globally. I agree.
Yeah. So when a Canadian excels in one of the few global sports, it is kind of hard to not also recognize them in this country, and that's exactly what's happened here. Her year was phenomenal. Tennis, if you know, Kevin and I as podcasters, is a sport that we both enjoy quite a bit. We briefly had a tennis show in the first time we tried to make the Sports Podcasting Network more sports. It turns out that him and I alone can't cover the entire world of sports as effectively as we'd like. So, it fell by the wayside. Maybe we'll get a tennis show back one day, but I think maybe an expert would be good for that. But anyway, moving aside, it's a sport that we both appreciate and love. I played it as a kid, half-assedly. Didn't have coaching or anything like that. And that's one thing that makes it what had happened at Canadian tennis so amazing to me, is that when I played, which, I'm not that old, it was just not even, wasn't options for you at all. Like I taught myself how to play tennis by watching,
TV. Bjorn Borg.
Yeah, exactly. And then trying to emulate what I was seeing by myself.
I agree. Now you have one of the best academy of tennis in the world in Montreal, with the High Performance Tennis Canada, and it's been well documented that the early 2000s, since 2010, the investment that Tennis Canada and the quality of coaching staff that they want to get, that should be a documentary that we do in the next year or so, the rise of Tennis Canada. And it all started with the investment in training, like this training center.
Long-term athlete development. Yes. It's very systematic, very research-oriented is what they do.
But not just that, also infrastructures and having clay tennis court that are at the same level as you would have in Roland Garros, at least close enough that you can train and get better at. And we've seen better results. And it all started with Milos and even Genie. It started a bit before that. Then Milos and Janie. And then now it's going to be taking to the whole other level with Bianca Andrescu, Denis Shapovalov, and Felix Auger-Aliassime,
And whoever we haven't heard of yet.
Well, the 2, 3, yes, exactly. It's a factory now. You're right.
Yeah, and look, Milos Raonic, who was the first breakout, for the longest time I've been having this conversation with other Canadians that was asked, just why are you talking? Why is Tennis Canada getting the benefit of your doubt here when it's just this one guy randomly came up, and that can happen in any sport? And there's truth to that. You can, Marion Bénard, the biathlete, right? Like
Marion what's her first name?
Marion
Bédard. So. No, I don't think it's Marianne. It's Bédard. I know that. So let's just say Miriam Bédard. That's what it is.
Well, there you go. Now that we're talking about what Olympics was that? That was the double Olympics.
Lillehammer. So it was Albertville, Lillehammer, and she got arrested for kidnapping her own daughter later on.
The point we're trying to make here is that random stuff can happen. So she won a gold medal there completely on her own. But people would try and suggest that was what Raonic was doing, but it wasn't. He was the first person to come through that system. So he kind of got the end of it when he was already kind of there. they pushed him over the top, and maybe not all the way. And he had one huge big weapon, which he still has when he's not injured, which is never.
Serve, yeah.
Which
You're
is
so
serve.
mean. Poor Milos. You mentioned Miriam Bedard. You know what's funny? She won the Lou Marsh in 1994.
Well, yeah, because she won gold medals, and back then Canadians didn't win gold medals very often at all. That's changed, but
ice hockey, an example, 1993, Mario Lemieux. Wayne Gretzky did win it before in his career. He won it in 1989. But what was interesting is if you go to the Wikipedia page of the Lou Marsh Trophy, you have winners by sport. And of course, there's 13 wins by ice hockey in sport, 9 different hockey players. 9 wins by figure skaters, 7 different skaters, but 9 Lou Marsh Trophy in figure skating world. 8 in swimming. That's since 1936, by the way, which was the first year of the Lou Marsh Trophy. So track and field, 7 trophy in the sports of track and field for the Lou Marsh. Alpine, 6 times. Alpine skiing. Then you have rowing, football, which would be American football, and baseball, 4 wins in the Lou Marsh. Golf, speed skating, 3 times. Golf, of course, you have the Mike Weir, and before that, speed skating, Jean Lamelin, and others. Kayaking, shooting, wheelchair racing, auto racing, and horse racing, 2 wins. 2, and Jacques Villeneuve was that athlete twice. He won at the Indianapolis 500. But it's fascinating. And then the one sport Lou Marsh win, Duane, tennis is one of them. So it's the first time a tennis player from Canada wins the Lou Marsh. You also have basketball, biathlon, bobsleigh, equestrian, harness racing. Back in the day, it was very, very big in Canada. So you have harness racing winners, marathon, synchronized swimming, weightlifting, wrestling, soccer, tennis, and freestyle skiing. Soccer is Christine St. Clair a few years ago. And just quickly, Duane, here are the last 10 recipients of the Lou Marsh. Let's start in 2010 because it was surprising in 2010. Joey Votto, baseball, won it in 2010 and also in 2017 in baseball. Patrick Chan, figure skating in 2011. He was a world champion at that moment. Christine St. Clair, after the London Olympics, she won it, having won a bronze medal at the Olympic Games. John Cormish, Canadian football. That was a surprising one that year. Kaylee Humphries now representing the U.S., but what? She could still win, though, the Lou Marsh example. If she wins the Olympics in 3 years for the U.S., she still can be Canadian Athlete of the Year because that's how it works.
Won't be, but yes.
Yes. Carey Price won it in 2015. Penny Oleksiak, 2016. Joey Votto, once again. Michael Kingsbury. All names that you've heard a lot here. Oftentimes in an Olympic year, the Lou Marsh will be heavily weighted for Olympic athletes. And Bianca Andrescu is going to be an Olympic athlete next year. Here's our segue. Is she a favorite for the tournament in Tokyo?
Yeah, she's co-favorite right now. There are 3 that are probably going to be the co-favorites, but the Olympic tournament's a weird one. We'll have to see how it plays out. She talks. That's one thing. To put this in perspective, she, as a 19-year-old. And she doesn't seem 19, right? Like whenever you hear her talk or even just look at her, she does not look 19. She does not talk like a 19-year-old. She talks and looks like a 25-year-old and performs that way, which is one of the things that makes her an incredibly amazing athlete that you just assume is going to continue to do this for 10 years. And she says that the Olympics are a big part of her dream, a big part of her focus. So this is where I think the 19 matters, that this is the new generation of athletes, that she doesn't know a time without tennis in the Olympics. And she views it as a very important goal of hers. Whereas, even the generation that is just kind of finishing up now, holding on, all of them, particularly on the men's side, who don't seem like they're ever going to go away. They kind of came up when the Olympics was just starting as a tennis event, and I believe Seoul is when it started. So they've all been around a while, but when it first started to be kind of visible, and it's just starting now, I think, to really truly be viewed as that 5th major is something a little different. And Bianca talks about it as a goal of hers. So yeah, it's absolutely a favorite. She hadn't lost in 6 months before the end of this year. So yeah, it's something to talk about for sure, something to think about for sure. And is she the favorite to win the Lou Marsh again?
Well, yeah, if she wins another major next year,
wins a gold medal next year, and wins another major, then you're hard not to be, because what she's doing, the Canadian athletes are having. It's a golden generation for them. This is a byproduct of now 15 years of increased funding, increased intention at that level, which has made Canada go from a non-player outside of the Winter Games in some sports to being an Olympic, punching above their weight in the Olympics, particularly on the winter side, where they are a superpower on the winter side now, right?
Yeah, well,
so
it's like one of the favorite country in not the majority of sports, but almost in most disciplines. In the Winter Games now, you have Canada top 10 almost in every single one of them.
Yeah, and in the Summer Games, which is a country that's covered in ice for 5 months a year, they're still probably going to win 20 to 30 medals next summer, and that's for a country of 35 million with, like I said, covering ice half the year is pretty damn good. So, yeah.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about the tennis tournament at Tokyo 2020. It's also a timing thing, especially on the women's side. The careers are not necessarily as long in general. The average career is about 3 to 4 years. So you have to be in the right age frame, the right window of your age and performance. When you get to an Olympic cycle once every 4 years, Bianca Andrescu has maybe the perfect timing. She'll be 20 in the Olympic Games next year, and that's the peak of a professional tennis players' careers, between 20 and 25. Perfect timing there. But we'll be back next week on the Five Ring Podcast to talk more about our love of amateur sports, Olympic sports, and topical subject in the world of sports. We love to talk about it here. There's no boundaries on the Five Rings Podcast. We know where it starts. It starts with the Olympics. We have no idea where it ends, and sometimes we talk about pretty much every single sport on the planet. Duane, we even did a show on netball a few years ago.
We did do a show on netball, which is in the Commonwealth Games and is still bizarre to me, but big in Australia. So there you go.
Big in Australia. And I wish we were too. One day we will. Until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramée, and this show at Five Rings Podcast. Once a week, we'll be back with this free show, the Five Rings Podcast, or Road to Tokyo 2020. But if you want more of Duane and I talking about Olympic sports, Five Rings Extra is available on the $5 tier of our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/sportspodcast network. Already one episode of Five Rings Extra dedicated to our miniseries on the 1976 Olympic Games has been made online. We're working on the second episode. We have a special show last Monday on Russia. Plenty of content for you to listen to. Until next time, you see us on the Five Rings Podcast. And until next time, own your podium, folks.
Ya lo hace. Pierna